back with you once again for another week of fire and brimstone conservatism. And this week I wanted to, if I could be so bold as to do so, or if I could be so presumptuous as to do so, I wanted to give Rick Santorum a little bit of free campaign advice, debate advice, advice for getting his message out there. As most of you know by now, Rick Santorum, of the four remaining GOP presidential candidates, Rick Santorum is the one that I am the most comfortable with. He's the one that I think is the best of the remaining bunch. Certainly I was a Herman Cain man for the longest time while he was in this race, but with Cain being out of it, with Michelle Bachmann being out of it, of the four remaining candidates, Rick Santorum is the one who comes the closest to matching my views on the most important issues. So he's the one that I want to come out of this thing. And Santorum's been on the upswing as of late, winning 3 primaries in the Midwest and really putting Mitt Romney on the defensive for really the first time in this whole GOP campaign. And so there was a debate that happened last Wednesday night on the 22nd, occurred on CNN down in Arizona. And this was going to be the last debate before the Super Tuesday primaries. And really it was an opportunity, really the first debate we'd ever seen where Rick Santorum was in there as essentially a front runner, as he pulled in front in a lot of the national polls over Romney. And it was really the first time that the spotlight and the pressure were going to be on Santorum. As such, it was potentially a great opportunity for Rick Santorum to hit that knockout blow on Mitt Romney and KO him for good. Unfortunately, the debate did not work out that way. Rick Santorum did not dominatingly defeat Mitt Romney in that debate. It just did not happen. So I wanted to discuss that a little bit today and some opportunities that Santorum might have had to better put his message out there that he might have overlooked. I wanted to talk about that a little bit today. Now, I will say this much. When I watched the debate on Wednesday night, I thought it started off very well. I thought that Rick Santorum in his very first answer made a great point about a topic that really is not discussed much in politics, even among the GOP candidates. It's a point that I think has been dying to be made for a long time now in this current political environment, and Rick Santorum did it. So I was extremely encouraged after Santorum's first answer. I really thought this would be the night, and I wanted to take some time because the point that he made here is something that's now been overshadowed by the fact that Santorum's remainder of that debate performance was not particularly good or was not as dominating as we thought it might be, because that's been the story. That great point that Santorum made at first has now been overshadowed and kind of cast aside. So I wanted to take a look at it and mention this point again and put it back out there because I think it's extremely important and that it's key. I'm going to show you 2 clips here in the next few minutes. The first clip is a clip from this very show back in June. I believe the official date was June the 8th, 2011, that I posted a video where I made these comments I'm going to clip from here. It was in episode number 18 of America's Evil Genius, where I made a particular point about entitlements and entitlement spending, how it relates to our debt, and how the claims of the lows and the left that our military spending is a key contributing factor to our debt are absolute hogwash. It's a red herring. I made that particular point, and then the second clip I'm going to show you is Rick Santorum talking about that same topic on Wednesday night. Incidentally, if you want to see that particular video, it's a video called Embracing the Third Rail. If you want to see that video in its entirety, just go to my YouTube page. You can see every video we've done. Everything we've done for the last year is on that page. So if you want to watch that video in its entirety, you can do so there. But here's a brief clip of me talking about entitlements back in June of this year, followed by a clip Wednesday night of Rick Santorum also talking about entitlements. Roll. On the 2010 budget projected, entitlement spending was well over 50% of that budget. Now, think about that for a second. That means that over half of that budget is money that is not put there by congressmen. It's money that's not negotiated out. It's money that's not, someone looking at our overall budget and saying, okay, well, we've got this much to spend, so I'm going to take X percentage of it and put it over in Medicare. No, this is all done by formula. This is all done automatically without any regard to what our economy is, without any regard to what our needs are, without any regard to anything else. It's automatically there. And it's very difficult to change. And it's over half the budget. That's huge. Now, some of you libs out there are going to yell and scream, well, if you're going to cut, why don't you cut from the military? Well, to give you a bit of comparison, that 2010 budget, national defense and education spending combined were only 22% of it. Bottom line is this. Everybody on both sides of the aisle is talking about fiscal responsibility. They're talking about it in different ways. But if you truly want to get a hold on our debt, if you truly want to get a hold on our financial situation, you must address entitlement spending. You must address mandatory spending. There simply is no other way around it.
Over the next 10 years. But there's bigger issues. When I was born, less than 10% of the federal budget was entitlement spending. It's now 60% of the budget. Some people suggest that defense spending is the problem. When I was born, defense spending was 60% of the budget. It's now 17%. If you think defense spending is the problem, then you need a remedial math class to go back to. Defense spending will not be cut under my administration, but we will go after all of the means-tested entitlement programs, Medicaid, food stamps, all of those programs.
Well, I certainly don't mean to toot my own horn, but toot toot. I was out here making that very point back in June, 8 months ago, and I've been, that whole time, I've been begging a presidential candidate of some kind to make that exact same point. That if you're serious about tackling our debt, you can only do so by tackling entitlement spending. And the idea that military spending is some sort of significant factor is absolute bull. And Rick Santorum made that exact point almost exactly the way that I made that point 8 months ago. I'm glad to see Rick Santorum coming around. Okay, I'm having a little bit of fun with this. Relax. I don't really think that Rick Santorum saw my video and took my point or copied my point or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just having a little fun with this because it's always enjoyable to see something that you believe so firmly and so vehemently come up in a presidential debate, and to see a presidential candidate embrace an idea that's been rolling around in your head for a long time. So I'm not really saying I had anything to do with it. I certainly didn't. In all seriousness, I am thrilled that at long last a presidential candidate has at least started to take on the 800-pound gorilla in the room of entitlement spending and the 800-pound gorilla of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that Rick Santorum has absolutely no desire to phase those programs out the way that I would like to do, but I do think he at least realizes what a drain they are on our economy, and that they do need to be significantly altered in some way. He and I probably disagree on how much they need to be altered, but at least he's bringing the idea up. So I was thrilled to see that. It was a long time in coming as far as I'm concerned, and I thought once I heard that answer, oh, it's on. This is going to be the greatest of all debates. We're going to eviscerate Mitt Romney. Well, it didn't work out that way. Soon after the phenomenal answer on entitlement spending and our debt, Mitt Romney began to challenge and launch into a series of attacks on Santorum's alleged lack of fiscal conservatism while he was in Congress. And this in and of itself really isn't a surprise, because Romney had already been running television ads to this effect and had already been making these type of statements in interviews for the last week or so leading up to the debate. So we kind of saw that coming. We kind of knew that would happen, and I was hoping Santorum would handle it a little better than he did. But really, he didn't come off that well, if I'm brutally honest about it. Not to say that Santorum said anything that was, particularly wrong in terms of factualness. I think factually Santorum did do better than Romney, but the bottom line is that Romney made the accusations and Santorum was on the defensive the entire time. He never successfully turned that argument around. And if we set aside the irony of Mitt Romney chastising anybody on their fiscal conservatism, I mean, come on, Mitt. You put health care in your own freaking state. How fiscally conservative is that? I mean, Mitt Romney criticizing anybody on their fiscal conservatism is akin to Paris Hilton criticizing Lindsay Lohan for her drug use and her lack of celibacy. You don't exactly have clean hands there, whether you're Paris Hilton or Mitt Romney. So it seems to me that you could have easily turned this around on Romney, but Santorum was not able to do so. They got into a bit of a tit-for-tat on earmarks. And this thing lasted like 5 minutes or so, and Romney was criticizing Santorum for voting for certain bills that had earmarks in them, and Santorum came back and criticized Romney for being a governor and using earmarks, and Romney said, well, I was a governor, I kind of had to do that. It was the situation I was in, and Santorum basically saying, well, I was in politics, I had to do that. It was a situation I was in. It all came across very petty. Nobody liked it either way, but it certainly did not put Santorum on the higher ground. And I thought that was a very big missed opportunity for Rick Santorum. Because what he could have done right there, what he should have done right there, the way he should have responded to Mitt Romney, the way I think he still can respond to him in the upcoming weeks, even though it won't be in a debate format, it'll be, in the media, interviews, and so forth. I think the way that Santorum could have and should have counteracted that would be to kind of stop it and say, hey, look, Mitt, you and I both recognize that there's a problem with earmarks. You and I both acknowledge that there's significant work to be done in order to streamline that earmark process and to better it and to minimize it. But with that being said, let's go back to that point I made earlier about entitlement spending and the debt. The bottom line is, if you actually compare the numbers, and you compare it, let's say, to your living room, in terms of the debt, entitlement spending is that big, expensive flat-screen television you have in your living room, and earmarks are the spare change you find in the cushions of your couch. Because we can argue about earmarks all we want to, but at the end of the day, earmarks are not nearly as significant of a factor in our debt as entitlement spending is. And then turn the argument back around to that. Make entitlement spending, make entitlement programs a cornerstone of your campaign. Because Mitt Romney can't hit you there. And in fact, you have a tremendous advantage because he put his own sort of entitlement program in, although not exactly the same way, but he put something similar to an entitlement program in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, Santorum missed that opportunity. And as the debate went on, Santorum kind of got to a point of defending his lack of fiscal conservatism and defending some of the things he did in the Congress, but is basically just playing the game and saying, hey, politics is a team sport. Rick, I understand that pragmatically you had to do what you had to do at the time. Okay, I get that. But in this political environment, the last thing people want to hear is that politics are a team sport. Unless you're following that up by saying it's a team sport of the people versus the government. You didn't phrase it that way. People don't want to think of politics as a team sport between Republicans and Democrats. Conservatives don't want to hear that. A lot of moderates, a lot of independents don't want to hear that. And heck, even a few Democrats don't want to hear that, believe it or not. Instead, the best way for you to approach this, instead of saying, hey, I had to give a little here to get something there, and talking about all the sausage making of politics that goes on in Washington. I mean, it's the old joke that you don't ever want to see law being made or sausage being made because you'd be disgusted by either one. People don't want to talk in this election about how the sausage of politics is made. We're disgusted by it. We've seen it before. We don't like it. So don't justify that, Rick. Instead, what you want to do is say, hey, yeah, I admit I was a part of that process. I gave on some things I probably shouldn't have given on in order to get something over here. But having been in that process, I know better than anyone else how destructive it is and why it needs to be changed, and I want to be the one to lead that charge to change that process. And that's where I thought Rick Santorum did not tie all of that together in the debate. I think if he could have made that point and say, yes, I was a part of everything that everybody hates about Washington, but that's exactly why I want to change it. Because he didn't make that argument, he fell a little short. He fell a little short. Now, the good news, if there is any good news from this, is that despite the fact that Romney won, if you want to call it that, won the exchanges with Rick Santorum, not that Romney's answers were particularly good, but they came off a little better, and he was the aggressor the whole time, so in terms of a debate, that means you come off better. While that happened, it did not seem to have the positive effect for Romney in terms of gaining conservative support that he might have thought that it did. As you no doubt know, I mentioned it on the show a couple times, every time we have one of these debates, I tweet the debate. I'm on Twitter. I've given you my Twitter address. A lot of you follow me on Twitter. And I tweet these debates. And I pay attention to what other people are tweeting in the debates. And I I find it very interesting to see how people react in a moment to what they see happening during a debate. And I can tell you that even though Mitt Romney was getting the better of Rick Santorum in these exchanges, I did not see the Twitter sphere exploding in newfound support for Mitt Romney. It didn't happen. I did not see people tweeting and saying, you know, Romney's coming off better, I guess I got to get behind him now. That never happened. People acknowledged that Rick Santorum wasn't doing well and that they were disappointed to a degree with what his answers were, but I didn't hear hardly anybody saying, well, now it's time to get behind Mitt. What I did hear some people saying is, you know, that Newt Gingrich sounds really good tonight. Now hold on, I'm not getting on the Newt bandwagon again. I made that mistake a few weeks ago. I'm not doing that. But the point being that those people that Mitt Romney needs to reach, the conservatives, the anyone but Mitt group, the people who are roughly 75% of the Republican Party who frankly couldn't warm up to Mitt Romney if we were cremated next to him, those people who he has to reach out to for support, and it's still not working. No matter how good he makes himself look against Rick Santorum or Newt Gingrich, it ain't working. I mean, Mitt Romney is in that unenviable position, very similar to what Barack Obama is as far as the conservatives are concerned. Believe it or not, there's some similarities there in how we react to both of them. In that, there's absolutely nothing Mitt Romney could do, from my estimation, nothing Mitt Romney could do that could win us over. Just there's nothing Barack Obama could do to win us over at this point. I mean, Mitt Romney could come down off the mountain with the cure for cancer, 2 pretty blondes on each arm, and the world's largest keg of beer, and we still would reject him. We reject Barack Obama, he did the same thing. And the reason is, just like Barack Obama, we see through Mitt Romney. We understand that he's not about what he says he's about. So we reject him. So while Santorum did not have the best debate in the world, I don't know that it did a horrible amount of damage, at least in terms of getting people to flip from supporting him to supporting Mitt Romney. Now, Romney might be able to pull off Michigan now, which I don't like, but in the national sense, I don't know that people who are starting to look at Santorum, even though they might have a slight lower amount of comfort level with him, I don't know that they've achieved a comfort level with Romney, nor that they ever will. The bottom line is that I think Rick Santorum can take this as a learning experience for how he puts his message out there in the coming weeks. He can take the idea that he needs to stick to his principles, which he largely did during that debate, something he's very good at. In fact, going into the debate, everybody thought that everything would be about birth control and social issues, and it really wasn't, because Santorum did very well on that topic. He did stick to his principles, and he also said, hey, just because I feel a certain way, it doesn't mean that I'm looking for government legislation to enforce it. I thought that was a masterful way of dealing with that criticism that he's had. So stick to your principles. Go ahead and do that. Own up to your mistakes. Don't try to sugarcoat the fact that you voted for some of these things that maybe you shouldn't have voted for, or that you supported some things you weren't entirely comfortable with in order to get something down the road. Don't pretend like you didn't do it, because we'll see through that. Go ahead and admit it. All I'm saying is don't justify it. Stick to your principles. Own up to your mistakes. Don't justify your mistakes. We know they happen. But own up to them. And then, most importantly, focus on the future. Say, yeah, I made some mistakes, and here's what we're going to do to change the process so nobody else can do the same thing. When you think about it, that's what the conservatives and that's what America is looking for out of this election. I think we all are smart enough to understand that none of the GOP candidates that remain have clean hands as far as the dirtiness of politics goes. Every one of them has some dirt on their hands. There's nobody that can sit there and say, you accepted earmarks and I didn't, because every last one of them did. Even Ron Paul, even though he has probably the cleanest hands of any of them, he's still been up there for a long time, and he's still taking some highway money that's been controversial, but they all have. Barack Obama's the same way. Obama said that he would be a different kind of politician. He hasn't. He's been in politics as usual. So we understand that at this point, no candidate's going to emerge who has totally clean hands. It's not going to happen. But what we're looking for is a candidate who recognizes that they have dirty hands and has a plan and has an idea for how to change the corrupt culture of Washington. That's where Rick Santorum can come into play. by sticking to his principles, acknowledging his mistakes, and focusing on the future. You do that, you can beat Mitt Romney, you can beat Barack Obama, and we can get America turned around. That's it for this week. This is America's Evil Genius. We'll see you next week.